Hi everybody, I'm back again. This is Aleana on Aleana Laster Show, The Power of Women. We have been so busy. You know, I'm trying to find people in the community who would like to talk about their program or give something back to the community. And I always ask you, please email me, let me know, and I can have you on the show. So it's AleanaLaster@yahoo.com, and it's right across the bottom of the screen. So just give me a yell. I know the holidays are coming. Everyone's tied up and getting busy, but think about me. I can put your show out there. Today, we have a very special guest. I just met this young lady. She went to school with my kids, and this was back at Pottinger School. And her name is Miss Jacqueline Williams-Hines.
Hello.
Welcome, honey.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Good. It's funny how I meet so many kids that, grown-ups now, that have gone to school with my kids, and then if you tell me you came by my house, I don't remember you, because my house was a house where all the kids come and hang out.
Yes.
But I'm going to tell Sangha and Lisa. What about Linny's? Did you know Linny's?
I did not know Linny's. I went to school with Sangha and Lisa, and I remember idolizing them when I was little, because I remember they were such fantastic dancers and gymnasts.
Frankie Hatchett.
Amazing young women.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yes,
I'll be sure to tell them. I tried to call her in between the show so she can jet down here. Lisa's too far out, she's working, but I knew Sangha was off today, but she didn't answer the phone, so I'm gonna tell her when I go home.
Yes.
But enough of my story. You have something very, very important to talk about.
Absolutely.
And it's something that gets attention during the year. I know they have the walks, and they have the maybe commercials out there. But you never know how to deal with this until you're a parent,
Right.
and that's the autistic child.
Absolutely.
I've been mulling over what you said the past few minutes that we've been talking. I don't know what I would do. I mean, I know I'd find a way, but if I thought my child had something wrong, maybe not hearing well, or I clap my hands, and I'd always would try maybe to make up an excuse. Like you said, they'll grow into it. Boys are slower than girls. But what happened if I was that child, that mother, and I had those symptoms of my child? What do I do?
Well, I have this question posed to me so much because I encounter a lot of young mothers who are just overwhelmed with just being a mom.
Yeah.
Some of our young mothers are still maybe dealing with issues of postpartum depression, being first-time moms, not knowing what to expect. So when you throw something else in the mix, like having developmental delays, it can be overwhelming.
I see.
And with a diagnosis like autism, it can present so differently from child to child. So that it's not this cookie cutter scenario where you can kind of look to say, okay, well, I've seen that before and I know exactly what it is.
Exactly.
Autism affects 4 different areas. It affects communication, it affects social skill building, it affects the cognitive functioning, and it affects language. And I want to point out that I made a distinction between communication and language for a reason. And children with autism, you may have a child who could be nonverbal, but have ways of communicating. So later they may be able to communicate through augmentative communicative devices. You may also have a child who has a lot of language, but no communication skills.
There's always that scale.
Yes.
So what is the youngest that you have come in contact with that shows symptoms of the autism?
I also have a radio show, and I talk to a lot of experts across various fields. And in hindsight, I was just talking to another autism expert who's a doctor in applied behavior analysis. And we were talking about a lot of the early signs that we missed, because like a lot of parents, I blamed myself for not picking up on it right away.
We do, as mothers, always blame.
A long time. And I say, parents, please,
don't blame yourself.
Don't do it.
Sure.
But in hindsight, talking to this physician, I was able to realize that there were earlier signs that I thought, typically when we're talking about it, you may go to sites like Autism Speaks or the CDC, and they say, well, we start to see it when the child is developing communication, around toddler age, 16, 18 months.
Okay, 16, 18 months.
One of the things that this person brought to my attention is you may be able to see that much earlier, and we're talking like months. Some of the things that you may see may be tied to physical delays. Okay.
You mean as far as movement or
movement, yes, delays
head
in
turn,
development. You know, of course, we want to definitely rule out anything that has a physical etiology to it.
Right.
We want to definitely make sure that the child is not having hearing difficulties
Sure.
and maybe not responding in that respect. But when you're talking about brain development, there are also aspects of development that are tied to that that are purely physical. So this physician brought to my attention that if you have a child who maybe is 2 months old and you're putting them on their stomach and they have a difficult time holding their head up, because by 2 months, that child should
the child should be up looking around, right?
Exactly. There is brain development that's tied to that movement. So if that child has a hard time and they're kind of dropping their face, or they're very fussy, they don't want to be in their stomach, or they're not starting to pull it up, that could be
That's a sign
that could be a very early indicator of a developmental
my.
milestone. Now, it may not be indicative of autism, but
Right.
it is a very early indicator
There's
of that there are
something's
some
wrong.
delays there, as well as having a child that's 6 months. You know, most of us have had that experience where we give our child our fingers and they kind of grasp on it and
Right.
pull up. If you have a child that's head is kind of falling back and you're pulling them up and they're not using their muscles,
Surely that's a sign
that
of
could be
something.
another sign of
Yeah.
a developmental delay. That could be, you know, tied to that brain not developing on a you know, a typical route. So these were things that I had never thought about. You know, I was still thinking, well, as you know, I work in behavior therapy, so I'm thinking, well, we're talking about when you're seeing the child not interacting with peers around that toddler age. But now there are indicators that we may be able to spot it much earlier.
That would be a blessing. Are there many
Absolutely.
places in Springfield area, or I would say the local area, that targets autism?
Well, you know,
here
I'm working on, interestingly
I opened the door
enough-
for you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Interestingly enough, I've been working on developing a program under the Martin Luther King Family Services.
Good.
We're looking at basically doing a lot of community education on the early developmental milestones and delays that parents may be able to pick up on, because in the African American community, we're still experiencing almost an 18-month developmental delay, diagnostic delay in getting our
What?
children.
Wait a minute.
Yes,
You're-
behind our counterparts.
You're 18 months?
18 months. And the reason why that's so critical, that's such a critical time, because when you're looking at early intervention, that's typically under age 3. Fortunately for us in Massachusetts, the RECA law was passed, so now our insurances will pay for behavior analysis after age 3, which is a good thing. Thank you, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, we don't have enough therapists, so most of those children are on waiting list. But
This is so terrible.
it's so important that we get those children identified early so that they can start getting the therapeutic interventions that they need to be successful when they transfer into the school systems.
But you know what's very sad, and we have to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the younger mother, the 15-year-old, the
Absolutely.
16-year-old, who is still a child themselves.
Yes.
Going through this overwhelming ritual of trying to raise a child. Some have family support, some don't. We'll be back in a moment with this interesting topic. Please stay with us. Thank you.
Damn it, woman, you didn't clean the damn house again.
I wasn't home.
You weren't home, so let me guess. Dinner ain't ready either.
No, I was out.
You were out. What? You should have been home. It couldn't be my time. Get over it. Come here. Why don't you listen? Clean the damn house and take your ass in the kitchen and cook my dinner. You're always behaving this way. Do you like when I act this way? Get this through your head. Get it through your head. This is my castle. I am the king of this castle. What I say goes. I hope it does. If it does, woman, oh, God help you if it doesn't. Get the hell out of here.
Why are you doing this? I love you.
And we're back again. My guest this week is Jacqueline. I gotta get your name right. Jacqueline Williams-Hines, a very special lady on a very, very special mission. And I know this is going to touch a lot of people who are dealing with an autistic child. And she is here to give you information, places to go, what to do, early warning signs, education. And I'm just so honored to have her here, and I think we're going to do a two-part on this. It's just overwhelming. It's just too much to get in one show, and she's brought all this material here that I'd like to cover as well. Jacqueline, continue. I think we were talking about what happens to the child who is a child, 15, right. 14, 16 years old, who gives birth to a child and doesn't have the support of her parents, but maybe leans on the great-grandparent or the grandparent who's already raised them. What does she do? How does she begin to recognize there's a difference if she's not fully engulfed in raising this child?
Right. You know, and that's so hard because you're still talking about someone who's developing themselves.
Exactly.
And I think for me the difficult part is for us culturally as African Americans, we can have this predisposition toward discipline. You know, we're worried when we go into the community, and we can be so judgmental. You know, we go into the community, we see a young mother, and the child is having difficulties, and it could be sensory, you know, and the child is quote unquote tantruming. And the first thing we do is we judge the mother. You know, that's her parenting skills. Yeah. And not understand that maybe this child's having sensory overload, you know, contribute to an undiagnosed condition, and that mother may be doing the best she can. So what we do when we judge her, we isolate her.
And
she
the mother's still a child as well. I mean, as you said before, their mind is not fully developing. They're still developing, let alone their body. And then what happens after, you know, they get the baby, possibly postpartum, like you said.
Yeah.
So how
and if they're under that specter of being judged, their parenting skills being judged, their only recourse may be, okay, well, I need to be a better disciplinarian and make my child act appropriately.
And that's not gonna work.
And that's so hard because that child may not even understand why they're being disciplined. And we see it so much. So for me, my mission is really to educate our community about what developmental milestones look like, typical developing milestones, what delays look like, and why you should really actively advocate for your child. If you start to see these delays, go immediately to your pediatrician. And I've had parents say, well, you know, I was concerned, I went to the pediatrician, they told me, wait 3 months, you know, maybe it could be behavioral. Well, you know, we know that sometimes that is that misconception that our community acts a certain way. You know, boys are a little bit more, we would say rambunctious or assertive or aggressive. And we've seen studies that say in the medical community, there is this perception. So if you feel that, okay, that child is not just being aggressive or hard-headed, as we would say, get a second opinion.
You know what would be nice, I think? You know, they send the mothers home with the bottles of formula and these little packets on how to change the baby. Why couldn't they somewhere incorporate maybe warning signs or awareness signs or educational signs of autism? Wouldn't hurt them to learn. They might not have an autistic child, but maybe one of their friends does.
And you know,
it's got to get that awareness out there.
That's what I'm working on. I've been out there advocating for over about 18 years now. My son is, my son is on the autism spectrum. He will be 21 next month, in January. And I've been doing this for a long time. And it's, you know, culturally, we really don't want to talk about anything that looks like a developmental or an intellectual disability. We just don't. We attribute it to things that, you know, he's just quiet, or, you know, my child is just overactive. And one of the things that I see so much is the doctor said my child just has a speech delay. And as soon as we hear the word delay, it's like, okay, in our minds, he's going to catch up. This is something we can fix.
Right.
Nobody wants to accept a diagnosis for autism, which is lifelong.
I know.
So it's so much easier and so much more palatable
Go into denial.
to say, okay, well, he's just got a delay. It's going to be fixable. So I say to that parent, you know, understand that autism doesn't mean that your child is never going to grow. It doesn't mean that he's never or she's never going to have a full life. It can be what you make it. We definitely have children, because it is a spectrum disorder, you have children that will need a certain amount of support forever. But you have some children who, given the proper tools and given the proper therapeutic intervention, may go on to exceed your wildest dreams. My son was meeting all of his developmental milestones. He was a typical toddler, and then he started to regress, and sometimes we see that. He regressed back to being totally nonverbal.
Really?
So we had to, you know, and at that time, we're talking almost 18 years ago, there still wasn't a lot known
At
about
that point in
autism.
time.
My pediatrician told me, we don't know what it is, but we know what it's not.
You know what it's not. So now, who was your support?
My support
You know?
was me.
Yeah, I know. You know, you need support.
Yes, and you know, God, because I don't want to say that people didn't want to support me. I think that people just didn't know how.
At that point
You know,
in time.
they didn't know how, and because it was a mom thing. You know, I was not in a position to say, this is too much. So I did whatever I can, and I say that I tried the kitchen sink method. If there was a new therapy out there, I was going to try it. I tried the gluten-free, casein-free diet. I tried, you know, vitamin supplements. I was going to try everything. And in hindsight, now that I am a therapist, I say I have no idea what worked and what didn't, because we threw everything in together.
Now, what about medication?
You know, I think when you have coexisting diagnosis, there is a place for medication for some of our children who have dual diagnosis. But for autism,
now, dual diagnosis meaning?
You may have a child who has autism and ADHD.
Oh, dear.
You may have a child who has autism and has seizure disorders. So there are other components to that. Some children have physiological disorders of, you know, digestive disorders. We have children who, very, very common to have acute insomnia. So you may have children who may need melatonin, which may work or may not work. So there's a lot of components that may come into play it may not just be autism. For me, I would say that, you know, I was blessed that my son didn't have a lot of other things going on.
Right. So if you are a person that has seizures, so you know there's medication for seizures, yet on the other end of the scale, there's a possibility he might have autism.
Absolutely.
So now you're dealing with two different types of dual medication.
Absolutely.
One to control the seizures.
The autism, you know, we haven't seen, I don't know that there is specific medication for autism, and I haven't seen it, and I would probably strongly advocate against anything until I've seen
until you have some kind of studies done.
Exactly. Because one of the things that we're talking about is when you're talking about teaching children to learn and brain development, it's very important that their brains aren't being inhibited by chemical inhibitors.
By chemicals, right.
So we're talking about a diagnosis that, what I do is behavior therapy. So in ABA, or applied behavior analysis, what we want to do is take a behavior that inhibits learning. So if you have a child that's tantruming or exhibiting self-injurious behavior or aggression, we want to find out what purpose does that behavior serve? Because in essence, that's still a means of communication. There's a reason
that's their way of means of communication.
Right. So we want to find out what that serves, and then find another way for them to communicate their needs that's socially appropriate. And that's basically the basis of this therapeutic modality. But the reason why it's so important that we do that early is because when we found in studies that African American children are perceived, as I said, to be more aggressive or older and wiser than their counterparts.
Which we would also, in years ago, parents would say an old soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but when you look at that in the context sometimes of education or social services
Yeah.
or law enforcement, you know, we see that reflected in our children being, you know, being seen to maybe get more punitive remediation in schools instead of therapeutic. So they may come in contact more with in-house policing because it's looked at more as a behavioral issue, as opposed to them having a diagnosis that needs therapeutic intervention or supports.
So how does a child go to public schools?
Yes.
Or is there specific schools that you, depending on, I guess, the degree of autism that you have?
Yes.
As to where you would
there's
go?
both.
Okay.
We do, fortunately in Springfield and in Massachusetts, we actually led the nation at one time as far as special education.
That's so
we
true.
were, and that's why you saw so many, when you look at our ratios for special education students, we were so high because we had a lot of people that moved to Massachusetts because we really did a great job. And I think, you know, by and large, we really do when you compare us to some of the other states.
I think the word, though, in just listening to you and the magnitude of this, and I'm so hoping I've got some parents out there or friends that know someone who has a child that's autistic that can tune into this program and find out more information. We are going to make this a two-part. The half hour just goes so quickly. We cannot get it all in, and you're so much of a wealth of knowledge on this
you.
and personal experience. And I know you must have been through a hard time. And it's challenging. And, you know, and that all goes to say for our show, The Power of Women, you know, we're good at our job.
Yes.
And we know our job, and we produce good babies.
Yes,
You
we
know,
do.
We're good. So what I'm going to do, you bought me a whole bunch of goodies. I love goodies, girl.
Yay!
Yay! Tell me about some of your books here, and then we can cover it with the second part of the show. A little technical difficulty with Mr. Nate Patterson. So we're going to break in a few minutes, and we'll be back in a moment. Thank you.
Ann Chernick is a dedicated estate planning attorney with a straightforward approach. She'll answer your questions and ease your concerns. Chernick and Chernick Law. Advice you'll understand. Results you deserve.
Chernick and Chernick Law.
Hi, we're back again. The Aleana Lasta Show, Power of Women. And I have with me a powerful woman. Women ourselves are powerful. And I was telling her that we're strong, we're good, we produce babies. I mean, we do 1,000 things at one time. We multitask and we're still good. She has a program about autism. And this is going to touch a lot of people. And I really would like to have feedback because I know a lot of my friends who have an autistic child and they're always wondering what to do and they try to tune into the programs. Listen to me, Jacqueline Williams-Hines has everything that you need to know, and if there's something she doesn't know, I'm sure she can follow up with it. So this is a two-part show. I'm going to close this off with her last few words, and then we're going to do another show for you because this is a powerful message that needs to get out. And I'm depending on you, my viewers, because I would like to help her, and helping her is helping the community. So please help me.
Thank you.
Jacqueline Williams-Hines.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap it up.
Yes.
There's just so much. I don't know where to begin. We were talking so much. We covered so much detail
Yes.
on set and off set. But you have the books,
Yes.
and that's going to come up on the next session. But if you could just a brief little bit about your books.
Okay. Well, I do have an autism awareness children's series.
Okay.
And
Is this
I've
produced
been
by you?
trying- These were all published by me, self-published.
Very good.
Yes,
You didn't tell me that. I had to ask you that.
I am
Oh, girl, stop it.
self-published. Oh my goodness. And you know, this was such a labor of love. Initially I just wanted my son's peers to understand what autism looks like so he could have friends. So the first book that was written was Joshua and the Star-Tabulous Dreammaker. And this was just kind of a brief overview of some of the challenges that my son was going through with sensory issues, seeming a little different, having meltdowns, not being able to communicate with his peers. So I thought if I could kind of explain it a little bit, maybe his peers would be a little bit more patient with
Sure.
him. And oddly enough, that's the only book that never says the word autism. It was just about wanting him to have friends.
But that was targeted not to say
Yes,
autism.
that was
Yes,
the
that's how
first
you
one.
want to get across.
Exactly. So the second book was The Adventures of Sutra Joshua from Planet Yethakan. And I love this story because it talks about a phenomenon called echolalic speech. And when echolalic speech, what happens is you may hear a child will just actually echo what they hear. So for my son, if you said, "Hi, Joshua," he would say, "Hi, Joshua."
Oh,
And
okay, I understand.
Right,
You kind of lost me for a moment. I was trying to catch you
what
on this one.
happens is that children with autism may have difficulty trying to read social cues. So as we're talking, your mind's already forming an answer because it's gleaning from what I'm saying information to help your mind make a response. With children with autism, they may have difficulty doing that. So sometimes their response will just mirror what they hear.
Mirror what they hear.
So that was a way to kind of introduce echolalic speech, and another thing called perseveration. You may have children who are just in tune with one thing, have very, very narrow fields of interest. So you may have a child who only wants to talk about dinosaurs or only wants to talk about trains. And it was just a really cute story on actually how my son taught himself how to ride a bike. But it also just explains why he was so just caught up on this one thing and the other children couldn't get his attention.
Now, how old is your son now?
My son will actually be 21 next year. And
All right.
It's still my baby.
Absolutely.
Still my baby.
All
but,
sons are always mom's babies.
He's an amazing young man. He has, oh my gosh, we'd need 2 or 3 shows just to talk about
Just to talk
him.
about your baby.
Yes. So the next book is Joshua That's So Slimming. And that's a play on words of a phenomenon called stimming or auto-stimulation. Sometimes we see children in the community maybe wringing their hands, bouncing around, clearing their throat, or rocking. And that seems to be a very typical depiction of what people think
Right.
about when they see autism.
That constantly,
Right.
Yes.
And
of
usually
course.
that's a way of them kind of self-regulating sensory input. And I've had an adult on the spectrum ask me, "What do you do when you're upset or you're frustrated?" And I said, "Well, you may see my foot." And
Here we go.
There, that foot. And she said, "That's stimming. That's stimming because you're self-regulating all that input that you're taking in. You're able to keep calm because that foot is going." And I never thought about it in that
never did
context. So in this book, it really kind of, in a very, child book, they are illustrated in a way of kind of introducing some of that.
Now, my question, are these books available? Are they online or on Amazon?
Yes,
How
my books are on Amazon. I actually have a website and a store that will only be available until the 21st. I'm self-published, and a lot of this has been coming, out of my pocket with some smaller community grants. But I did have a store, and I've since not been able to renew my license. So you can get me on Facebook. You can look me up on, I do have 2 websites. But if you catch me on Facebook under Jacqueline Williams, or actually go under No Small Victories, which is my organization page, or NSV Online Radio. I have a radio show. You catch me on any of those, inbox me. I will definitely get you these books, because the one thing that you will not find on Amazon is that I actually have a discussion guide that goes with the series, and that's only exclusive to coming through me.
Coming through.
Yes.
Well, you know what? We're going to pick this up on the second show.
Yes.
Okay, and please tune in. We'll probably run it. I don't think it'll be this weekend. I don't know. But the following weekend, and then the following weekend, I believe I'm going to try to anyhow.
Okay.
And then also it will be on the Betty Law's channel, the internet channel. And this will be running 24 hours a day, along with the other programs we've already done in the past. So if you miss it here, you can bound to pick it up there. Remember her email. Your Facebook and
My Facebook
email
page.
and all the
Yes.
contact ways to get a hold of you. We're going to list it on the bottom of the
Yes.
screen. And so there's no reason why parents, you should be out there wondering what to do if you have a child that you believe, yet you don't want to believe that there might be autistic traits. And with that, everyone, I'm going to call it a show tonight, thanking Jacqueline Williams-Hines for being here.
Thank
Such
you.
an honor, such an informative program. We can go on and on and on.
Yes.
So listen, stay tuned. 6 o'clock, Saturday, the Aleana Laster Show, The Power of Women. See you then.